Are the Dallas Cowboys hunting corners, or is it all just a bunch of baloney? Zach Wolchuk alongside the Super Bowl winning scout Brian Broaddus as the Cowboys get ready for week 2 of OTAs. It is Love of the Star. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. You can catch Love of the Star wherever you get your podcasts. It is, of course, an Odyssey podcast. But Brian Broaddus, the big headline news that broke over the weekend between our last episodes was the rumorooskies surrounding Jaylen Ramsey of the Miami Dolphins, and you went hunting as you always do. Are the Cowboys connected at all and interested in acquiring cornerback Jaylen Ramsey?
I don't think they're interested right now in pursuing Jaylen Ramsey. They did a really nice job even after the draft with the George Pickens, stayed aggressive on that front. I think they're going to be aggressive potentially if we see some June 1 names. The problem is, though, if, say, a Jaylen Ramsey becomes a June 1, he's going to have some competition, and then he's going to be able to pick where he wants to go. There's some people that believe that maybe to the point in time that maybe Jaylen Ramsey might be a guy that's a safety. I know you've talked about that on some of our shows, that is this now the time to transition for Jaylen Ramsey, much like we've seen with the Charles Woodson or a Leroy Butler, guys like that have started as corners. And Ramsey's played at a very, very, very high level. He still can play at a high level, but people are wondering a little bit about that. Really, where does that kind of that fit? But I know for the Dallas Cowboys, when I was asked about it, or when I asked some people in the front office about it, they said no, we're not at this time. But I do believe they are keeping their eyes open for June 1 potential cuts. We're going to get a period here. We're in week 2 of our OTA practices and stuff. So Thursday as we tape this, and there'll be some news coming out of there, some thoughts and stuff that maybe we could get into this weekend about where they're lining up guys and stuff. But corner's still kind of an issue, and it's an issue, maybe not with the names, but more so the health. So I wouldn't put it past him to look at corners. I know a very, very popular name to be talking about is Stephon Gilmore, a guy, but how much is that going to be? But to answer your question, when I asked about Ramsey, they said, no, not at this time.
Yeah, and last night on X, formerly known as Twitter, Jaylen Ramsey started making posts basically saying goodbye to the Miami Dolphins and how he's loved every team that he's played for. I was asking around with some people in Miami. I don't know that there was really a ton of communication, maybe up until yesterday, with Jaylen Ramsey and the organization. So I think that, hey, Jeremy Fowler with ESPN, he does an excellent job. But, the Cowboys are always kind of linked to this. I'm not saying they wouldn't have interest, to your point, but at least right now, maybe this is something. It gets the feeling like it's very much like defensive tackle and edge last year, Brian, where we're sitting there at the tennis courts in Oxnard during our show, the G-Bag Nation 105.3 The Fan, and we hear, all right, they're bringing in Carl Lawson to work out. They're bringing in Linval Joseph to work out. And they kind of saw, okay, this is what we've got in a couple practices. We need to add here. And that's where maybe a Stephon Gilmore or maybe some of the other free agents that are still available. Mike Hilton's a name that is always brought up, who is a slot corner. Maybe that's where they start to kick the tires, or a trade, or maybe there's another name that we're not talking about, to your point, that gets released here, next week following June 1. But it does seem like they're not done at this position. I just don't think, I don't know that anything's going to happen between now and training camp practices.
Yeah, that would be the way that the NFL front office works, or really the way that the NFL as a whole works. They've done a great job of keeping their product in front of the fan base basically 12 months out of the year. There's only 1 month, though, that they don't. Now, I said they keep it in front, but they've done a good job. 11 months of keeping fans engaged, whether it's the season, whether it's the draft, free agency. They do a great job of keeping everybody engaged. But there's a period where NFL personnel, coaches, players, they go away. And it's roughly from like the middle of June until the week before July 21st. And that's when the Cowboys are going to report. That's when they're going to head to Oxnard on July 21st. And so that middle of June till that time in July when they head to California for training camp, their teams, front office people, everybody gets away from it. That's their 4 weeks to just get away from everything and try and recharge the best you can and get ready for another campaign, whether it's the season and the draft and all the things that we cover on a weekly basis, daily basis in some cases. But yeah, it's it's, if you're going to do something, it's got to be, I think, in the next couple of weeks, because like I say, there's vacations and getaways and stuff have been planned. It's not that people totally just completely shut things down, and there's business that can be done, but it's really, really hard to find somebody in office from the middle of June until the middle of July. It's just kind of one of those given things where you just know that we're not going to be able to do much business. So if we start to hear some names, and maybe there's some teams that will go through these OTAs and this mini camps, and they're like, listen, we need to make an adjustment here. We don't, we need to move on, or maybe we've got a surplus and we want to go ahead and, make that. I mean, a team that looks like to me that has a ton of quarterbacks is the Cleveland Browns. I mean, that team. And so, if you're going to be one of those, if you're looking for a potential backup quarterback guy, maybe, maybe it is, call a team that has, like the Browns, but has that kind of surplus. Maybe you're making these calls, right? Like, listen, we'd love to get a corner, but we don't want to pay, we don't want to pay $20 million to the corner. We want to, we'll make a trade and we'll use one of our picks, and maybe one of your compensatory picks for you'll get next year, and try and move it to that guy. But I think it's kind of the timetable I would look at is between the 1st of June to the middle of June. And then after, say, June 15th, you're not going to get a bunch of activity done.
All right. So now we do start the OTAs. And this is, this is always fun. Last week we got to hear some good feedback. It sounded like the linebacker group was one that performed. I know we talked on our show yesterday about Shamar James getting himself an interception. But when it comes to OTAs, and this is, you've always said to me, you're like, hey, just look for where guys are lining up.
Yeah,
is a little bit more difficult when you hear Brian Schottenheimer say, like, hey, we're going to have some guys running with the ones just to give them, an opportunity. Like, is he,
sure.
Is that tough? Does that kind of skew it a little bit? Because it's like, man, maybe he's going about this a little bit of a different way. I don't know. Like, it's not to fool the media, but it's just to give other people opportunities. And that's not necessarily the chess pieces you're going to see on the final board come Sunday.
Well, he might be doing something to fool the media. The other practices that they do have, we were hearing about, Elam and how well he was playing in the media part of practice, last time that we got to watch. And so you're like, well, okay, great. He's off to a great start. You mentioned Shamar James. I mean, we talked about this lack of instinct. You want to play him in coverage. Maybe he's a will linebacker. Well, all of a sudden, he gets an interception off Joe Milton, and oh wait, he's in coverage. All right, good. That's positive. But maybe the other practices he's not getting that done. Maybe so I think there's some things that the way that coaches schedule. When you get the 3 days, when you get that 3-day mandatory mini camp, and you get to go out there and kind of watch every day, you can kind of pick up some things. You can the coaches can't fool you like they can when you only get to see it once a week. Like, okay, hey, let's be mindful. Tomorrow we have a media practice. Let's not show something that we might, and then where you really pick up is, of course, training camp. But yeah, I've always, and it was really during the Mike McCarthy administration, man, there were not competitive practices. It was not like you were, I mean, there was not a lot of individual, maybe some team stuff. We'll see with Schotty and how he has practice. Jason Garrett, as much problems as I had with Jason Garrett, my God, that guy, he had a practice you can evaluate the team off of because of the competitive periods, the one-on-one, the calling out of certain players going against each other. You can evaluate the practices that he had. And maybe that's a little bit reminiscent of where his upbringing was with Jimmy Johnson.
You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast, Love of the Stars and Odyssey podcast. You can find on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Let's carry over that conversation on Schotty just for a second, because it seems like energy. Everybody's kind of saying the same thing. They're echoing the same sentiments. You know, your experience living in football, you get a new head coach in the building. Is this kind of the way it goes? At the very beginning, it's the honeymoon phase. Everybody's got great things to say. It was interesting. I saw another Cowboys content creator in front of the show, Jay Tuck, put out, hey, these were the quotes with Mike McCarthy at the end. And everybody was singing McCarthy's praises of the culture and the locker room. Honestly, what Brian Schottenheimer's putting out there, with the right kind of guys, it is a little reminiscent of the Jay Jeezy days there in Frisco, if you will, Brian. So I don't know. I mean, it's great. I'm sure as a fan, like, this is exciting. We're basically clinging to any type of optimism you can find right now. But I do think this is the Kool-Aid drinking season. And if you want to do that, go for it. I'd find myself at fault of doing it as well. I can't help it. I love this football team, and I'll dive into those waters with you. But I do kind of think this might just kind of be par for the course when you get a new head coach.
Well, I remember when Bill Parcells came in, and it wasn't kumbaya and let's all feel great. It was people were on eggshells because we had gone through we'd gone through with Dave Campo, and we were awful with Dave Campo. And so we were all thinking like, well, this guy's not going to come in and want us all around. We've been 5-11 3 straight years. So there was a little bit of that. And I'd known Bill since 1992 when I got in the league, when New England and Green Bay, we exchanged a lot of draft information. So I worked with Coach Parcells quite a bit. So I was excited when he came in. Ultimately, though, it cost me my job just because I couldn't keep my damn mouth shut. But that's where some coaches come in, and Schottenheimer is a young first-time head coach. Has a family history. Dad was an outstanding coach. If he's a quarter as good as coach as his dad, this team will be all right. But yeah, there's that. You're starting to see that feeling. The players, it's fun again, that kind of thing. And Mike had his moments with some of the players. I'm sure some players were not really too happy with Mike, and it always seems to change. But when you see guys like with Terrence Steele should be happy. Bell should be happy. Wanye Thomas should be happy. You know why they should be happy? Because the regimes that didn't draft them are now gone. Those guys get a new lease on life. Look at Terrence Steele. He went from Joe Philbin to playing at a really solid level to, with Mike Solari, a dip. And you wonder if the dip was because of something Steele did or something that Mike Solari, was there a disconnect? Well, look at Bell, and I mentioned it's safety. Wanye Thomas, it's fun again. You know why it's fun again is because guys that, you have a fresh start. You're no longer, if Jordan Lewis was here, Jordan Lewis is the greatest example of a guy that just outlasted everybody. Every time we were throwing dirt on Jordan Lewis, he would uncover himself and go live to fight another day. Whether, with Rod Marinelli and that whole group that was like, he's too small, he can't do this. He outlasted everybody. I mean, so guys feel a sense of relief and maybe a little bit of breath of fresh air. But then there's some guys like the Sam Williams of the world that don't have the sponsors anymore, that weren't drafted by. So all of a sudden now you have to, okay, I'm in a contract year, I've got to prove myself, that kind of thing. I think there's different levels of excitement on a team, different levels, because you got some players that are happy for the new start to be clean slate. And then there's other guys that like, oh, damn, I'm about to lose my job, because there's no guarantee for Tolbert. And I say that, and I know folks are going to comment like, oh, Brian, you're all wrong about Tolbert. But kind of think of where Tolbert's at. If Tolbert had more consistency, if he had the Pittsburgh game and then week 2 he did the same thing, and week 4 he did the same thing, and week 5 he did the same thing. You can't have great week 2 or 3 and then all of a sudden not be around for 4 weeks. So there's different levels of that excitement because you're thinking new opportunity, and then you're also thinking, wow, this could be the very end of me. So it's kind of on both ends of the spectrum a little bit.
Yeah, and if Jaylen Tolbert had have lived up to the expectation and become the player that they thought, we wouldn't have been talking the whole draft process about every single option at wide receiver in round 1.
And the fact that they went out and gave a 3rd-round pick on a guy that they might not even have after this first year, after 1 year, that's really all you need to know of everything they think about behind CeeDee Lamb.
Right. And having just given a 4 to Jonathan Mingo, and they've been totally criticized for that, I really think in a perfect world, they'd ideally like Tolbert to be number 4 on that depth chart following training camp, and Mingo move up to wide receiver 3. We'll see how
he's capable.
Mingo looks.
He's capable, and Jonathan Mingo got off to a good start. I mean, from the media portion of practice, there was some positivity coming about Jonathan Mingo, but yeah, Jonathan Mingo can't be a guy, a big, good-looking, that type of receiver, and just wilt and not do anything, and he can't do that. He's got all those wide receivers with the George Pickens trade. If that hasn't got your attention as a wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, other than CeeDee Lamb, if that didn't get your attention, then you probably need to be somewhere else. But these guys are fighting now for some spots.
Yeah. I mean, that wide receiver room, my gosh. I mean, you got Jalen Brooks, you got Flournoy. Guys that were taken towards the end of the draft, in recent years. Kevontae Turpin, of course, is probably guaranteed a roster spot.
Yeah. Squad guys. Yeah.
So it's gonna, and then the running back group, that's one that is constantly discussed about. Did they do enough there? Deuce Vaughn, I think, is probably an odd man out. I don't really. You talk about sponsors. I don't know that I really see, unfortunately, a spot. Maybe that's a practice squad guy as well, but I don't know. Is there a position group specifically that if you could go, if we're at OTA practices, you're like, this is what I'm watching today?
Well, I'm fascinated always what happens with the offensive line, because I want to know, and here's a guy that maybe is happy about, as I mentioned earlier, happy about a coaching change, is Tyler Guyton, and was some of the things that he was going through. We were watching training camp practice last year, and there was some very encouraging things that he was doing against Micah Parsons. And you're like going, okay, this is a good start. And then Jared Verse came through with the Rams, and you're like, oh geez. But then you're thinking, well, damn, Jared Verse was eating everybody up in camp. So, but I think that there's probably Mike Solari again, probably, maybe not on board. And again, I don't know this. I'm just saying, I'm putting it out there. But the fact that Guyton didn't get work, even when the season started going south, even though he wasn't the starter and those coaches were fighting for their jobs. I understand that aspect of it. But experience for Tyler Guyton got thrown to the wayside with coaches fighting to keep jobs. And don't blame them. I would play, hey, I'm not here to develop your guys and then get fired. That's a coach's attitude. Like, I'm not, hey, you want to tell me to play so-and-so? So this whole thing with Trey Lance, why do you keep playing Cooper Rush? Play Trey Lance. They didn't play Trey Lance till the very last game of the year, to kind of see where he was at. So, but I think there's a coaching change. And your question was what group?
Yeah.
That focusing, give me the left tackle spot. Let me see how we're playing again with the corners. How are we where is McQuamu in this? Is he inside? Is he outside? Where's Carson? Are they playing him solely on the outside? How about Hall and those guys? How about those those players as well? Kind of a thing. So I kind of feel like though that's the spot that I'm looking at right now and trying to kind of figure out where I'm at. Those the offensive line, and then also though with the secondary, sure.
Yeah, there might not be a player that can dictate the success of your season as much as Tyler Guyton in that left tackle spot. But I'm certainly intrigued. What are they doing at corner? Is it Kyer Elam on the outside?
It sounded like Elam got off to a great start,
which would be huge. I mean, gosh, if they could find something out of Kyer Elam, that would be massive. Try and resurrect his career. But what do they do? I mean, is it Deron Bland? I know Bland. It's so tough because he's on a contract year, and if he wants to play outside, I understand that. He is tremendous outside and inside, but he probably is your best option at slot corner right now, unless Israel McQuamu did look good against Tampa Bay in that wild card playoff game.
And it's crazy that sometimes, like you say, we're talking about guys that have had sponsors and have outlasted regimes and stuff like that. That's something that you have to be very, very mindful of this football team. You have to be able to say, okay, well, who of the older guys are going to show the ability to make things happen? I mean, like I say, you have to have some sponsors on some of these things in order to make this all work, because, there'll be guys, there'll be some young guys that were selected by this new coaching staff, and some guys are going to have to, they're going to have to pick their games up and say, okay, well, is McQuamu better than? Is he better than, this? Is he better than, at linebacker? Look what they did with the additions of some of the linebackers that they've done. But then there's guys like a Buddy Johnson who had an interception during the media part of practice when we watched.
Sure.
But is Buddy Johnson can he take out somebody? I mean, are they going to keep? They drafted James? These guys. It's a difficult dynamic for a lot of guys when you're starting to put together the 53, because these new coaches don't have the history with these players like the front office does. The front office has an idea, like Jerry and Steven and Will. They have an idea of these players. They've seen these guys like Eberflus and these other coaches, and White Cotton and those guys. You're telling me about Mozzie Smith, and it always seems like everybody's come in and had this Mozzie Smith, maybe even Mike Zimmer. They tried. I give Zimmer and Jeff Zugina some credit. They at least got Mozzie to play at a better level than the previous staff was able to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and defensive tackle is another huge one. Can they find something from JT or a King Basote? I mean, how much better did they get in the middle? I mean, is this something where Solomon Thomas, who looks fantastic from what we saw a week ago, but is he going to be able to help out in the running game, right? I mean, certainly they've been hunting defensive tackle help for a long, long time. So does that end up being a group that is improved in being able to stop the run? And then the edges, I mean, we've talked about that, right? You always assume if you have run defense issues, it's up the middle, and they have been poor at defensive tackle.
The edges
have been an issue. Absolutely.
Been a problem. And I think that's why I think that's why you go out and get Turner, and guys like that to be able to,
some size, some length.
Yeah.
I mean, with him, Nealand, and then even, adding a Donovan Ezeraku, who I do think is solid against the run. Hopefully you are better suited now at defensive end, even having lost to Marcus Lawrence, who was your best run setting end. You've got guys in Nealand and Peyton Turner that should be able to help you out.
I agree. I totally agree. I think I know that Voch Lombardi and I, when we talk about our draft and stuff, we were talking about run defenders and bendy guys, and I think that Turner and Nealand I think Nealand was turning into a little bit of a bendy guy, but you've watched him a bunch. I don't think he's this. Ezeraku is a up the field dip and get to the spot. Nealon was more of a fight with you, but I think he was developing some technique, and then he got hurt, and then all that just kind of went out the window. The coaches were not interested. They didn't really have time. There was questions about their jobs, and it just kind of all fell apart. It really fell apart for a lot of those young guys. Well, Maris Leofau, and guys that were kind of, and then all of a sudden the coaching turned into, well, we're going to have to try and survive here. And can we play Guyton? Can we play Nealon? Can we play, it just is a mess that way.
You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Time now for the Dean Julia Mailbag. Zach Wolchuk alongside the Super Bowl winning scout Brian Broaddus will always put out some questions for you when we record Love of the Star. And hey, whatever you ask for, we're here to deliver. Now, we did get quite a few questions on Eberflus's defense, Brian, and you were in the building working alongside Flus. So based on your understanding of Flus's defense, do you think, and this is from Javier, should Donovan Wilson be looking over his head to be maybe replaced or released? Do you think Hooker and Thomas could be your starting safeties?
I think all those, the safeties are clearly in play here. I mean, to me, when you look at, and I mentioned this earlier in the previous segment, I think a breath of fresh air for Bell. I think a breath of fresh air for Thomas. Our young kid that they signed from Syracuse is potentially in the mix as well. I don't think that you're gonna get like the too high shell. You're gonna get a lot of zone coverage. You're gonna try and funnel things to the inside. So I think that Donovan Wilson is one of those guys, and Hooker. I think both of them are in play for potentially getting replaced. Now, it seems to be like with Wilson, he would be maybe the easiest one because he's more of a down safety. And how well is he going to play in coverage? Never a question about the physicality. There's some question about the tackling and stuff like that. Bell can tackle. Thomas can tackle. That's what Flus is going to want. He's going to want guys that have the ability to play on the hash, be able to react, but be able to tackle when they need to. And people are probably going, "Oh, damn, Broaddus, it sounds like every team wants that." But in this case, the way he plays the scheme, he originally started. Matt Eberflus started with Rob Ryan. That's how he got to Dallas. Rob Ryan was an odd front, 3-4 front, crazy schemes where matching up, and sometimes you'd have 10 on the field, and you try and match this, match that, and that's kind of where Matt learned some of his stuff. And then he got with Rod Marinelli and Chris Richard and became more of a 4-3, more of a play the two high, try and keep everything in front of you type of coordinator. So that's but to answer the question, absolutely. I think both safety spots have to be looked at this summer, and probably the most it'll be a battle if Thomas and Bell and others can step up and take Wilson and Hooker out.
This is from Tim. If y'all were running the team, name 3 areas that you'd make a change to improve the team in your eyes. It can really be anything, whether it's positions, schemes, changing roles, whatever or wherever you really want to go with it. If you have 3 areas you would like to improve the roster.
Do you have some in mind? I'll let you speak on this one. I spoke a lot, but I mean, I wrote down 2 real fast, but then
certainly
go ahead.
The injuries at corner. I would love it if I could add a starting cornerback to this team that I feel good about 100%. That's where I would like to attack. Defensive tackle, I think, is also one where, hey, it's just an unknown, really, what you've got at the position. If I could, wave a magic wand and say, hey, I can add a plug-and-play starter here, I'd feel much better about those position groups. And then, quite frankly, it's not that I'm throwing dirt and I'm quitting on Guyton. This is a young man that has not played a lot of football, and that's forgotten, right? I've stressed this point a lot. And honestly, Brian, you take accountability a lot when it comes to, the draft and how we talk about maybe this is something like I'm at fault and we're at fault where we didn't explain Guyton properly. And the thought process is, if the Cowboys are taking an offensive lineman in the first round because they've had so much success, this guy's going to come in, be plug and play, and he's going to be awesome. Yeah. Tyler Guyton he started 1 year of football, 1 year at right tackle for Oklahoma. Now, he was protecting the blind side of Dylan Gabriel. So, we were thinking this, but it's a switch to another spot. It's a guy that needs reps. And he was not quite at the same trajectory, at least of maybe being plug and play ready as other guys that started multiple years, like Tyler Smith, like Travis Frederick, right? Like Zach Martin, Tyron, you go back. I mean, hell, this year, even Tyler Booker. Tyler Booker's been a starter for since his freshman year at Alabama. So, Tyler Guyton needs time and he needs development, and his game just, it wasn't quite there. But left tackle and this offensive line is going to dictate. It does for every team. It's easy to say. But the offensive line is going to dictate how good this team is. And a left tackle is probably our biggest question. I'm a Cooper Beebe stan. You know that. I think he's going to be fine at center. Tyler Smith's a star. We're hoping Tyler Booker is really, really good. And Terrence Steele, I agree with you with the new coaches. You've gotten sustainable play at right tackle from Steele. He's not going to kill you. If we were to go and watch every play of other offensive lines, there's probably, we're going to have a different view on Terrence Steele. You can get by with him. But at left tackle, man, you got a big question. And I'm hoping Tyler Guyton can take the step. But if I'm really win now, that might be a spot where I need to be ready to find, man, do I have another option? And maybe it's on the roster. Maybe it's Awesome Richards, who I do like quite a bit. But, it's hard to find linemen, but that would also have been one that maybe I'd have. And maybe it would have been taking Josh Simmons at 12. They're out of Ohio State, Brian.
Yeah, I was all for about Josh Simmons. I do love the pick of Booker, though. I think you did an excellent job of addressing. I'm going to throw running back in there, too.
Okay.
I want them to prove me wrong with Williams, and I want them to prove me wrong with Sanders, but more importantly, I want them to prove me wrong with Maffa. Okay. That's who I want them to prove me wrong with, because I don't think I would have gone that direction, but I respect it. You're in the 7th round. There's some guys earlier in the draft you probably could have, but man, my guy Allen was there. Krosky Merritt was there. There were some guys I really, really liked. And, I wish they would have done it, but I'm intrigued by Maffa. I hope he's not Bo Scarborough, that, comes in and just a big guy that's not very usable, but he looks like he's a powerful guy. Looks like he runs tough. There's times where he can get away from people. He's not going to make a lot of people miss. He's a physical back. I hope they prove me wrong with that one, because I'd like to see it be like, I'd like, Maffa to show up. I know Blue's going to show up. And you know what, this whole thing about the running back might be that Blue is good enough to be the every down guy, and whoever's behind Blue, Hunter Lipke and whoever else, maybe that's going to be good enough. But I'd sure like Maffa, and I think the running back spot is one that I'm kind of looking at. That if Sanders looks like he's at the end, I'm not interested in keep going there. If Williams looks like he's at the end, I'm not interested in keep going there. I have my doubts about Deuce Vaughn. I just think he's too short. I think height limitations, huge heart, but what do you do with him on special teams if he's not the starter? So to me, I'm kind of like still looking, but I'd love for Maffa to prove me wrong.
All right, last question here from Robert. Besides Dak Prescott, if you could pick one player to guarantee a fully healthy season, who would you pick?
Wow.
I know that's a good one. Initially, my mind did go to Micah Parsons. Yeah. Now, I know on our post-game show, I did make the comment several times, and I stand by it. Like, that defense wasn't playing well with Micah on the field. But you do see a drastic difference in pressure rate in wins, and really just the way teams are going to attack you when you don't have the presence of a Micah Parsons on the field. I mean, he is a game changer. And you have, I don't know how many else you've really got on that side of the football.
I think it's Jake Ferguson.
Okay.
And I think that, to me, if you can get it where it's Lamb, Pickens, Ferguson, and then play from there, give me a Jake Ferguson where he's not having knee pain and he's not dealing with a concussion. Because I think both affected him in a really, really, really tough way last year. So if I could get a healthy run after catch, spin out of tackles, jump over tackle, if I could get that guy that I had a couple years ago, boy, that would go a long way in helping me be where I need to be. I'm going to say this. How about a healthy Deron Bland? Yeah. After what he, with the foot, I think he played his way, but it kind of took a little time, but then everything's kind of started working for him. I think Deron Bland would be, but the first thing I thought about when you asked the question, other than Dak, was Ferguson. That was the first thing I thought about.
Contract year for him as well. I mean, I hope he goes and balls out. No question.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, sir. You've been listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you very much to Brian Bronish, the Super Bowl winning scout, Peyton Russell producing. I'm Zach Wolchuk. Until next time, we'll have recaps on all things OTAs. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hugs and hand pounds, everybody.